Full Contact. In association with Mitsubishi Motors, drive your ambition.
Hello and welcome to Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph and Mitsubishi Motors. Just 4 days now from the start of the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan. We're with you every Monday throughout the tournament to keep you updated with all the latest going on. Alongside me today is a World Cup winner and a World Rugby Hall of Famer. It's former England back rower Maggie Alphonsi. We'll be casting our eye over all the home nations ahead of the tournament openers this weekend. England kick off their campaign at home to Tonga on Sunday morning. One man who won't be part of Eddie Jones' squad is Danny Kerr, the experienced scrum half, and his omission was a surprise to some, but he'll be joining us to talk through his feelings on the squad, Eddie Jones and the match at the weekend. We'll also be speaking to the Pacific Island Welfare CEO and former Samoan international Daniel Leo about the threat that they and the other Pacific Island sides pose heading into the World Cup. Two of the tournament favourites, New Zealand and South Africa, meet on the opening weekend in Pool B, and the former Springbok Tinas Delport will join us to look ahead to that big clash. Plus, we'll be speaking to Maggie about her own Rugby World Cup memories, her playing days, and we'll get her take on the difficult topic of transgender rugby players and their place or otherwise in the women's game. Maggie, hello.
Hello, Brian.
Are you going out to Japan?
I am, yep. I'm leaving just before the quarterfinals. So I'll be working with ITV, doing a lot of the work in the UK, and then, heading out ready for the quarterfinals onwards.
Well, let's hope that England get there and you see them. Well, now the dust has settled. Look, it's all the warm matches. The phony war is all over. Very quickly, how do you think the respective sides are shaping up?
I'll talk with England first. For me, England looks strong, quite exciting to see that Eddie Jones has all these different combination of players that he can definitely mix up, and especially with the tournament starting with two physically strong sides for them, Tonga and USA, it gives him opportunities to try different players out and then build on that strength. So I think England are shaping up quite well. Wales, look, they won one of their 4 warm-up games, but I think for me with Wales, they are a team that grow. So as the tournament kicks off, I think you're only going to see them get better. So obviously their first game is going to be a tester for them, but their second game is where they need to really be at it, and that's Australia. So for me, I think Wales are probably not necessarily where they need to be at yet, but it's about peaking at the right time. So Wales, I do not discount them out at all. Ireland didn't necessarily have the best of warm-up games, to be fair, but the reality is they're a side that you can't count out, and I think that you'll see them obviously be tested against Scotland, but they can still have a really good route to the semi-finals in particular. And obviously Scotland, for me, Scotland are the side that they've had a few injuries, they've got depth. Again, their first big games against Ireland, so they need to be able to put out the bag. So, overall, I think everyone's shaping good, but not until the tournament starts can you really tell what teams can do.
I don't know if they rigged this. I'm sure they didn't rig it, but in previous World Cups and in the FIFA Football World Cup, quite often you have to wait till the end of the pool games before they get exciting and the tension. Right from the off, you've got games like New Zealand, South Africa. You've got Ireland, Scotland, and because these come right at the beginning, it means that nearly every weekend you've got huge games. And if you could arrange a tournament in that way, it would be better for everyone. It's possibly just fallen like that, but this is going to be special because you'll have really crucial games. Now, the opening games, possibly not Wales, but certainly Ireland and Scotland are going to be playing their starting 15s, their strongest 15s. They've got to do that. England have Tonga up first. I can't see Eddie playing more than a handful of first string, can you?
from my perspective, I reckon Eddie will probably do half and half. So he's got Tonga and he's got USA soon after. So what I would do if I was in his position, not necessarily start your full out and out strength side, but what you would do is put some of your strong players in there, but some players who theoretically aren't your starting 15, but are, will definitely be utilised throughout the tournament. So you've got a real balance, because what you don't want to do is risk your big players to injury.
And put the big players on the bench, wouldn't you, though, in case it goes wrong?
Big players on the bench to make sure you've obviously finished the game off. Knowing the way Tonga and USA both play, we've seen in previous World Cups and obviously in other games that they've played, Tonga are a physical unit. So if I was playing against England, if I was the Tonga head coach and I was playing against England, I wouldn't start my first team, because actually I know that that's the game that I probably wouldn't win. So actually what I would do is put, again, my not second string, but players who wouldn't be necessarily my starting players. And if you're not a starting player, you would want to go out and prove your worth against England. So what I expect is those Tonga players are going to want to absolutely destroy England, want to prove their worth. So I think it's going to be a physical game, and same with USA as well. They're going to want to go out to prove their worth, and that's where injuries are at risk for England.
Well, the former England coach, World Cup winning coach, Sir Clive Wood, he thinks discipline is England's biggest enemy this year, and defence coach John Mitchell has revealed that Owen Farrell is working on his tackling technique. He really certainly needs to, after some risky attempts. He's been walking the tightrope, hasn't he? It's simple as this, isn't it? If you make the referee make a decision, you can't complain if he gets it wrong.
Yeah, totally true. I think it's good to hear that Owen is working on that. He's been very much open about that. He has been on a bit of a tightrope. We all remember that game against South Africa, which pretty much came down to England winning it. But the tackle at the end pretty much could have cost England that game. And going into the World Cup, prior to any World Cup or any tournament, referees all come together and they talk with the coaches in terms of what's going to be the themes of the tournament. And I guarantee you, tackle height is going to be one thing that they're going to be hot on. And it's best to not put yourself in that light that you're going to get picked up. So for Owen, doing all that work prior to the tournament is only going to ensure that he stays on the pitch for a bit longer and England don't give away penalties that are effectively not required.
Well, the referees have all had a meeting and they've been counselled, or if not told, by World Rugby. I don't know what they've been told, but this is usual. And there'll be certain things that they've been told they must referee strictly, because World Rugby are well aware that this is the global showpiece for the game. And even if you don't like refereeing, taking account of that, you have to, and they will do. So all the sides have to find out what the referees are going to do it by terms of interpretation and just adapt. And England, it's not recent, and their penalty giving has been a problem for ever since Eddie Jones, and probably before that. What do you do if your side is giving away too many penalties? How do you sort that out?
Well, that's where you come to the leaders in the team, and everyone's questioned a little bit England and their leadership and the players in that team who can change things when things aren't going so well. So in my previous England team, if we gave away too many penalties, the key players would bring the squad together and it's pretty much it's problem solving, So it's not about saying to people, guys, stop giving away penalties, because, no one wants to give away penalties on purpose, but it's about actually identifying what do we need to do in the next 5-10 minutes to ensure that we get the referee on side. So yeah, I'd say almost for England, and they're fully aware of it. It's basically being on the line, because the way they play at the moment with John Mitchell, their defence is ruthless, and we don't want to take that away from England. But it's about not giving away cheap penalties, which you can easily avoid.
The only problem with that is what if it's the team leaders that are committing the penalties, which is one of the things. Look, Ireland-Scotland, huge game for both of them. Henshaw has been ruled out, hamstring injury, only just returned. To me, Ireland haven't recaptured, and I don't think they are going to recapture their form of 2018. Brilliant players, world-class players though they are, the halfbacks, Murray and Sexton, have had so many games out over 12 months. it is very, very difficult, even for very talented players, to suddenly come back and play absolutely on par. And if they don't, Ireland don't function anywhere near as well, as they should do. Scotland, they're trying to find their way back in. Who knows if they've got the fluency to play the game that they need to. Interesting clash. I can't really pick it.
No, nor can I at the moment. Looking at the warm-up games for both of them, we haven't seen the best of Ireland. We haven't seen the best of Scotland, really. So this first game of the World Cup for them, it's almost, I hate using the cliches, but it's going to be quite unpredictable. And you're not really quite sure what form they are going to be in on that game. But you've really highlighted it. Murray and Sexton are two key decision makers for Ireland, and they pretty much run the game. And they haven't had a lot of rugby, and they haven't necessarily been on form as well. And you almost feel when they're not on their best, it does have an impact on Ireland. It's going to be a tough one to call. I'm not necessarily going to say who I think is going to win it, but I do think it will be one of those games where it will go down to the final play, final minute.
Wales have Fiji first up. On paper, there should be a win, although everyone knows it will be a physical game. Now, in every World Cup, the Pacific Islands have had a big win over a Tier 1 team. You're just waiting to see which one it will be. Could it be this one?
Oh, I don't know. So I think when it comes to Fiji are a side that I generally think could cause a major upset in this tournament, as you've really highlighted, especially in Pool D. Wales they're a team that we haven't seen the best of them yet, so they can quite easily potentially lose it to Fiji. But Fiji also, they're playing Australia, and I think they're actually playing Australia first, and I think that could be quite an interesting one to see how that pans out. But I generally feel with Fiji, they've got some key players who are exciting to watch. I
think with Fiji, if they were playing Scotland, who play a very open game, that could go either way. When Wales play, whichever combination they put out, their defence, you've seen all the warm-up games, the scoring is very low, on both sides, and that's one of their problems. So that's not ideal for Fiji. A lot of Welsh fans are quietly confident, some of them not so quietly confident, about them actually lifting the trophy. Now, for me, the only reservation I have about that, I don't have any reservation about the players or the defence, which is very good. I just wonder if they have the scoring potential. If, for example, the first 20 minutes goes wrong and you have a bad bounce, a bad decision, a bad play, and they go 2 scores behind, do they have the armoury, now especially with Anscombe not being there, to come back and score points quickly?
I think you sort of highlighted it there as well. I guess what the worry that I have for Wales is the depth, especially at the half-back position. And Rhys Patchell, didn't he pick up an injury as well in the warm-up games? So you almost feel if the shoulder, all the weight of pressure is on Dan Biggar, and I guess he gets a lot of criticism on the way I guess he manages the Welsh team, and it's very much one-dimensional. I mean, for me, he's proved his worth. He's a brilliant at what he does, and if anything, not having Gareth Anscombe, to come on potentially to change it up a little bit. He's got to play a different way, and we saw that with Wales. They started to play a different way in the warm-up games, but I think there is always a worry with the way they play. Is it one-dimensional? Is it predictable? And they have to almost have variety in their attack, because when you come up against the bigger teams, let's say if they come out of their pool, they could possibly meet England in that quarter-final, and you're going to have to change up the way you play.
Because for me, they've got a very, very good back three, and they need to get those players involved a lot more than just trying to take ball on counter-attack. They've got the attacking potential. They need to find a way to get them involved much more often. One player who isn't in Eddie Jones's squad, it was a surprise to many, is Danny Kerr, the England and Harlequins scrum half and Telegraph columnist, who's now going to join us. Hello, Danny.
Hello, guys. You okay?
Yeah, not bad. How's your ankle?
It's all right. It's all right. I'm 2 weeks post-op. Just about walking again on it. I've still got this big moon boot on, but I think we're ahead of schedule. One of those, mate. Not the end of the world, but annoying timing.
I presume that means you're not on standby.
You never know, Brian. I'm still holding on to that one hope, the old Stephen Donald, that you never know. Look, it's one of those things. I'm just focused on getting back as soon as I can, trying to get back in a Quinn shirt. But stranger things have happened. So I'm probably a fool to believe that it still could happen. But, mate, you never know.
Well, you've spoken to the Telegraph about your thoughts on the residency rules, and I know you were hugely disappointed in the omission. Not a personal issue, I don't imagine, with Heinz, but more of a law issue. Does that make it worse?
I think, look, I've got absolutely no problems with Willie Heinz. He's a good bloke and he's a good player. I was as shocked as a lot of people to know that he was eligible to play for England when I found out he could. So, but look, it's not nothing on him. I think there's other ones in World Rugby that have probably stung people a little bit more. With Devin Toner and the Irish World Cup squad. For me, it's obviously just a massive disappointment to have the opportunity taken away from you. And whether it would have been me or it would have been Ben Spencer or Dan Robson or Richard Wigglesworth, it's kind of like someone new has come onto the scene very quickly and got that spot. But it's one of them. I can't sit at home moping about it. It's happened. You've got to get on with it. And I'm thoroughly behind the team and hopefully they'd go all the way in Japan. Hey,
Danny, it's Maggie here.
Hey, Maggie, you okay? Yeah,
not too bad. I guess the question I want to ask you is, obviously, you're not part of the squad, and obviously, I think you're a fantastic player. Are you going to enjoy the World Cup? Are you going to watch it still, or are you just going to focus on, getting yourself back and fit for club rugby?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I'm sure you feel the same when you're out. You feel like you're missing out, and there's obviously going to be a massive amount of jealousy. I'd say that's the word. I'd absolutely love to be out there in Japan, playing for my country and the chance of winning the World Cup. But I'm trying to dive into a bit of the media side of things. I'm going to be doing a bit with ITV and BBC, and obviously got my column with the Telegraph. So. I'm looking forward to kind of looking at it from that side of things and probably taking a more of an open mind into the tournament rather than just having my England blinkers on. I'm going to be looking at a lot of other teams, and I'm just completely dead excited. I think like everyone else is to watch some unbelievable games. That first weekend of World Cup action, some unbelievable games going to be shown. So I'm excited just to sit back and watch it from my sofa and enjoy it.
So, Danny, since you're crossing over to the dark side in the world of media, are you going to have your phone on and you're going to be messaging the boys, getting some insider knowledge and background?
Look, I think, I've got some close bonds with a lot of the boys that are out there, and a lot of the lads that we kind of started the journey together with Eddie 3 years ago. So I know how hard they've worked. I know the effort they've put into each session that Eddie puts out there. And I've got some good friends there, obviously a couple of Harlequins in Joe Marler and Carl Sinclair. So I'll be definitely keeping in touch with the boys, seeing how they are and, wishing them all the best.
As for England's chances, you've written that they have a capability to go all the way. I agree. But what makes you think that they could win it in particular?
I think that they've generally got 2 or 3 of the world's best players at the moment. I think with Owen Farrell, you've got a guy that doesn't crack under any sorts of pressure. He relishes that, and he's a born winner, and he's leading the team. He also doesn't miss many kicks, which is going to help. But I think someone like Manu Tuilagi, I think there isn't many people in the world like him. Someone that possesses as much power in defence as he does in attack. And he has got the X factor. He is a guy that if England are in trouble in a game, they need a score, he'll just say, give me the ball and I'll go and do something. And he has the ability to go and change a game like that. I think for England, they're going to have to win 5 very tough games in a row, which I think other teams are probably going to have. Look at New Zealand, South Africa, 1 very tough game at the start, relatively easier 3, and then into a quarterfinals. But I think that's where England could get it right, that they will go in, battle hard, and you just hope that they don't expend too much energy in that Argentina and French game to then lose a bit in the next three. But I'm highly confident that England can go all the way. I think it's between them, South Africa and New Zealand, but I think England have got the capability to do it.
Well, when they're all available, if they're picked, I've never seen as many genuine ball carriers in an England side, nowhere near. And that for me is a huge factor. But let's just ask you about a combination which you have been part of, the 9-10, Ford, Farrell at 10, Farrell at 12, Ford on the bench, etc., etc. What's your take on that?
It's the $1 million question, isn't it? Look, I think there's huge benefits of both, of playing Ford and Farrell together, but then also playing Farrell with a Tuolangi and a Slade combination, or a Jonathan Joseph. And I think the best thing about it is that George Ford and Owen Farrell's relationship is so strong. They know each other's game so well. They've played with each other since they were 5 or 6. But if George does come onto the pitch, if they need to change something, then the team can just seamlessly fit into that style of play. And I don't think many other teams in the world go in with that genuine connection of a 10-12 like England do. So I think there will be games where I think Owen will start at 10, and I think there will be games where George starts. And I do think England maybe will get one up on a few teams there, that they have that genuine 10-12 relationship.
Danny, I fully understand when you said you'll be jealous. I totally understand that as a player, as a human being. A lot of people might not, but that's because you're a competitor. Enjoy your media time. Perhaps a career afterwards, but thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Cheers, guys.
Yes. Maggie, Warren Gatland has admitted that his side have been training with balls covered in baby oil. Now, you can pay him a lot of money for that in London, but he's preparing, so it's said, for the humidity in Japan. And I understand this because Kings Park in Durban, I played a game there, was almost impossible to hold the ball properly. It was a nightmare to throw in and so on. Have you ever come across that?
Well, I've never put baby oil on a rug ball. I'll be open and honest with that. But I have been out.
Not good. No.
I have been out in Japan, and I know what it's like in terms of humidity. And like you've made a very good comparison there, and it has a massive impact on the ball. You know, trying to get decent grip, trying to create those long, big missed passes. It does make things a little bit difficult. And we talk about other top sports teams, and they always talk about that marginal gains, doing their 1%ers. And for Warren, if this is the one thing that might help prepare the squad for the conditions that they're going to go through. I've been to Kitakyushu, where they currently are at the moment, and again, it gets really hot. So if it will prepare them, then you do whatever it takes.
The worst thing about humidity is if it's pouring down, everyone can see it's bad conditions and they make allowances. When it's sunny and they think, why aren't you catching this? This is ridiculous. What better conditions could you have? But there's no way to stop it. You carry on sweating. You can put, the grease, the stuff on your hands. It works for about 2 minutes and it washes off. Gloves, no, they get soaked as well. So, players will just have to put up with it. And actually, they should have been prepared for this. Well, we were just talking about the Pacific Islands and their contribution. There's been a lot of talk recently about them not being supported in the way that they should be. Why don't we speak to another guest, Daniel Leo, who's the CEO of the Pacific Island Welfare, and he's a former Samoan international. Hello, Daniel.
Brian, pleasure to be here.
Yes, and you. Can you just explain what your work is with the welfare body?
Yeah, no problem. Since 2016, we were established as the European branch of Pacific Welfare, looking after 400 odd players who have moved to Europe with the main reason of them rugby as a profession. So helping players from England, France, the more obvious markets to places as far flung as Russia now, Romania, Italy. Has been semi-pro and pro for a while. So yeah, we've got close to 500 players now at sort of every level from the Pacific Islands, and a lot of those guys come from the Pacific Islands themselves, people like myself who've had a stepping stone from New Zealand or Australia, it's probably a little bit easier. But for some of those guys who've come directly from the Pacific, it's a little bit more difficult. Just mundane stuff like getting a driver's license or putting your kids into school, and understanding Ofsted in the UK can be quite difficult if you've never had that background. So yeah, just working on a whole lot of levels really. And the other side is the advocacy, really pushing for better conditions for those players as well. And
well, that's an astonishing statistic. I knew there were a lot of Pacific Island players in Europe. I didn't appreciate it was that high a number. Can we talk about the World Cup? Tonga take on England this weekend. They had a difficult afternoon recently against the All Blacks. Can you see them causing England any problems?
Oh, geez. I think, Tonga on their day will benefit hugely from even 2 weeks together. We just don't have the resources to be able to pull our teams together for any relevant amount of time. So, with the tour, 2 weeks in between the All Blacks and England, I think a lot of gains can be made over that period. So I'd imagine a very different side. Also, you've got a few key players to come back into that mix that weren't there for the All Blacks game. Steve Murphy, who's probably quite well known over here from his time at Leicester and France, coming back to London Irish at the end of the World Cup will make a huge difference just to their set piece. So I'd imagine Tonga to really to step up and put pressure. I don't see them winning. But I can't see the blowout in the score that happened in the All Blacks a couple of weeks ago.
Fiji have a really good, good in terms of Tier 2 teams at the World Cups. They don't play home nation Wales first up, but do you think they are going to knock anyone off? Because statistically, the Pacific Islands always take one Tier 1 scalp in a World Cup. You just don't know which one it is. Can you see that being a potential one?
Yeah, I think I think there's a couple of scalps that could be taken in this World Cup. When I look at it, Samoa are coming into form. We had a narrow loss to the Wallabies over the weekend, and they've got they're coming into a pool where Scotland and Ireland aren't particularly Ireland are probably in the form that they'd like. So you'd like to think as a Samoan team that team they could knock off one, maybe two, even the host Japan in that pool. But I think for Fiji, everybody's talking them up this World Cup, and that's never a good thing for a Fijian side who really thrive on being the underdogs and nobody giving them a chance. And you've seen it, particularly when the first couple of games. I think they've got the Wallabies and then Wales. They need to win one of those games to progress through, if not both of them. And I think Fiji, the typical circuit, they've got the best backline in the world, hands down. But when it comes to the tight exchanges, I still question whether they can really front up in the set piece and the pick and go game when Wales turn on the power game, and really, in the tight exchanges, that's where they'll be tested, and that's where Fiji are always tested. So as long as you stay away from that sort of game against Fiji, you usually do pretty well. And when I was playing for Samoa, we used to play Fiji twice a year, so I was very well versed. And you just don't give them targets, don't give them a chance to put on a big hit early or make a big break. If you can hold the ball against Fiji, most of the majority of the time you win, and you win convincingly. So I think most teams are switched on to that. So Fiji have got their work cut out for them in terms of people that are starting to realise how to play, and also all of their players, the majority, I think 60 or 70% of their squad are based here, either in England or France now. So their players aren't the unknown quantity that they usually are coming into a World Cup. We all know that the De La Salles and the Rapini Falfaldi-Bukas coming in, but usually one or two names in the squad now. They're not the unknown quantity, so people will have more of an understanding of what they bring to the table. And I think Fiji have got their work cut out. And saying that, they've got some of the best players in the world, not just in their backs now, but in the forwards, particularly in the back row. And Besteliato, who's at Claremont, Viliami Mata, who's at Edinburgh now, two top back rows in the standout back rows in the European competition this year. So they do have some of the best players in the world. It's just whether they can pull it all together again. Struggle with the terms together, but they've had a nice build-up. John McKee, the coach there, has been very proactive in coming to Europe and touching base with the players, but also with the coaching staff, and making sure sure that he's got the best players available to them for this World Cup. So definitely, if you look at across the board, I think in terms of Pacific Islands, Fiji look like, from the outset that they've got the best chance of really causing an upset. Not just causing an upset against one side, but hopefully progressing into a quarterfinal where we haven't had a Pacific Island side in the quarterfinals for a while now. So I think we're well due one.
Well, what to do about the gap between the Tier 1 and 2 nations? I saw recently Steve Hansen and the New Zealand Rugby chairman Brett Impey saying the gap is getting wider, not smaller. Ben Ryan, who you will know from Fiji Sevens, has talked extensively on this podcast about developing the game in the Pacific Islands. He is of the opinion you need a Super Rugby franchise down there with a stadium. The problem with that is, will you get the money through? Will the government play ball and so on? But I thought a couple of the things that World Rugby could do to help the Pacific Islands, and which wouldn't cost money. You could change the nationality rules so that anyone who comes over to Europe or a different country and takes a nationality and doesn't get in a World Cup squad can still play for their original country, even if they've got capped before that. I would make it only one way, so it only applies to Tier 2 teams, because that would... I haven't gone through the number of players, but I would think there are several, if not more players, who would be available that aren't because of the present rules.
Yeah, definitely. I think as long as it's done with integrity, there's definitely scope to look at the eligibility laws that that the governing body currently abides by. We've got a lot of players of Samoan heritage and Samoan-born players who have played one or two tests, just to be discarded and never to play for England, for New Zealand, Australia again, who would make a significant difference to our national squads if those guys were able to come back. And maybe it's, as you say, they cap it at, if you've played over 10 caps, you can't come back, or there's a 3-year stand down period from your last cap in line with how long it takes to qualify a country by nationality. But definitely, I think the current laws do not reflect today's world, and the fact that someone like myself is Samoan parent, New Zealander mother. And I played for Samoa, but a lot of people make a decision to play for New Zealand and can never go back to represent their countries of heritage, which is, I think, is quite sad, and it's not conducive to the growth of the game. And that's, I think, the key thing is if we want to grow the game, we need to invest a bit more into Tier 2. As you say, it doesn't need to be necessarily monetary. I think it could be both. I think there needs to be some sort of gate-taking share by where a Tier 2 country visits a Tier 1 nation. There needs to be some sort of, similar to the FA Cup model where some of that money that's being generated by the match needs to go back into that developing side's nation as well, because we've got the problem here of every time we play against England, Samoa comes to England, we don't receive any of the gate takings, any of the profits being generated by the TV audiences or anything really. So we come, and that's based on a reciprocal agreement. But the problem being England never come to Samoa. We haven't had England come to Samoa in our history, so it's never reciprocated. So for me, it's got to be a profit share model come into World Rugby, which would make it sustainable. If Japan play it to them, there shouldn't be this gap where the England players, and the English Union can afford to play. Now I think it's up towards £30,000 per match, and the Japanese get paid £200, or the Fijians get paid £150. I think the gap has gone too wide. So it's just about bringing that back. And I agree in a sense with what Steve Hansen said. There needs to be more done, but I think we need to. I thought it was a bit rich in a way. I think New Zealand haven't been that great in terms of helping us develop either. They put in blocks, which mean that our players can't play in the Super Rugby competitions in New Zealand. One or two players max. So it means that our players have had to come over to Europe and take up opportunities over here, which means we're so far flung, which is very difficult for any nation, particularly when you're stretched for resources, to bring a squad together for any meaningful camps, training camps. So, everyone needs to look at their backyard before they start pointing the fingers at others, I think.
they also need to look at the fact that if they really want a global game, then the rich people have to get their hands in the pockets. But that's not always the case. Daniel, great to speak to you, mate. Doing great work around here, and thanks very much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Full Contact, in association with Mitsubishi Motors. Everyone's ambitions are different. You can climb to the top, or you could take on uphill battles of a different kind. You can explore for hundreds of miles, or you could begin a bigger journey. You can make time fly, or you could make it stand still. The Mitsubishi SUV range. Drive your ambition.
They don't come much bigger than this. New Zealand and South Africa on the first weekend, though. A bit of a lottery or not. New Zealand, well, they're still the team to beat, probably, but the Springboks have had wins over them recently. Why don't we speak to a former Springbok who's a regular contributor and co-host to this podcast, Tinus Delport. Hello, Tinus.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
Okay, mate. What is the expectation back home about this? What's the mood like?
I think the mood is very positive around facing the All Blacks. I mean, it is going to be a massive marker for the Rugby World Cup. You know, it's the first big game that's going to be played for the Springboks, and you know the team will go in with a lot of confidence because of recent results and recent performances against the All Blacks. So there's a lot of positivity and a lot of good expectations that's been put on this team for this World Cup.
Hey, Tinus, it's Maggie here.
Hey, Maggie.
Tinus, I'm going to ask you the question around the All Blacks assistant coach, Ian Foster. He recently said that the key to beating South Africa is unlocking their defence. Is there more to this South African side than just their good defence?
Yeah, I think they've really worked into the traditional play of South African rugby. So, you know, yes, it is a very aggressive defensive system that they've put in place, but it's on the back of a very strong pack that can be dominant. So defensively, it's probably the strength, but although you know they apply a lot of pressure through the forwards, the defensive system, the high balls, there's also a couple of really exciting players in the back, and then you know you can expect from the turnovers that will be created, guys like Cheslin Colby, Saboon Corsi, Billy Leroux, these are all really, really great finishers. So I think although the emphasis will probably be on the defence, they're very quick to transition into the attack.
Well, one of the things that they have, like New Zealand and England, possibly not Wales, possibly not Ireland, they have the ability to score points quickly. And that could be very important when you get into games, because as you know, things cannot go your way for the first 20. You can find yourself behind. And if you don't have that creative, you don't have that ability, you are unlikely to get it back. Can I just ask you about the head coach, Rassie Erasmus? Because didn't you play with him at both club and was it international as well level? Is that right?
Yeah, we played several years together in Super Rugby and Currie Cup, and then also Test Rugby. So yeah, he was a really good teammate in the playing days.
Did you know way back then that he was bound to have a coaching career and become a top coach?
Yeah, Rassie was always one of the thinkers in the side. You know, he invested really early on in an analysis suite, even in those days in the late 90s, early 2000s, before everything was really digitized and on computer. He bought this analysis suite to really look and analyze games and come up with plans. So he's always been from playing days. He's been very intelligent about coming up with plays, analyzing the opposition. I remember one day against the Harlequins in the Super Rugby, he came up with this plan in the line-out where they lift him up because he was lighter than the other guys, and then whilst he's up there, move back, and then they throw the ball to him whilst he's being sort of supported up in the air. And it took everyone, including the referees, by surprise, and it's something we got away with on that day because he is a thinker about the game, and that was always going to be his path, was going to be further into rugby because of his intense knowledge of the game and the effort he's put in terms of analysing and study the game really.
Tinas, look, there's been some controversy surrounding the second row Etzebeth. This week, he's been accused of alleged assault and racial abuse. The question I want to ask you is, how big of a story is this back in South Africa, and do you expect it to affect the team's preparation going into the weekend?
No, I think it's a lot of it is politically driven. Back home about this incident, there's a lot of people that's been defending Eben Etzebeth and his what apparently happened or allegedly happened, and sort of rubbishing it, sort of really come out strong in defense of him and his character. And this is from all walks of life in South Africa. So I do think there's probably a little bit of political motivation in terms of the accusations, but that still needs, the verdict is still out on that, and it still needs to be proven. I think what this team has done really well is the fact that they really tight-knit squad together. You can see that they really enjoy each other's company, both on and off the pitch. And I don't think this will have such a big impact. They'll solely be focusing on what needs to be done on the weekend.
Tinas, very quickly and finally, what's your gut feeling about the weekend?
I have a good gut feeling, Brian. For me, the key bit is to see the reaction of the Springbok players compared to the All Black players after that draw in the Rugby Championship. The expression on the All Blacks' faces and their reaction was that of defeat. The Springbok boys were absolutely crazy and going in celebration. So it shows me that it means a lot to them facing the All Blacks, getting results against them. So they're really positive. They've got that confidence that they can upset the All Blacks. So for me, I'll compared to this time last year, I'm a lot more confident that this weekend will be successful for the Springboks.
Well, absolutely. And the good thing for both sides is they can't meet each other till the final thereafter. Anyway, mate, I'll enjoy it. Maybe we'll speak to you afterwards.
Great stuff. Thanks, Brian. It's certainly going to be an exciting World Cup, and I think everyone's can't wait for Friday for the kickoff. So fantastic to be part of this Rugby World spectacle.
Just like to mention the former Welsh player and British and Irish Lion, Gareth Thomas, who quite a while ago came out and revealed that he was gay. Whether or not you think that was brave or whatever, I personally do. He's now, I understand, also broadcast via social media that he's got the condition of HIV. Now, I now also understand that this was the subject of a newspaper story, and that probably that forced his hand whether he wanted to reveal that or not. And that's one of the iniquities of newspapers doing that sort of thing. All I'll say is, Gareth, HIV is not the disastrous prospect that it used to be, and hopefully there'll be enough treatment for you. You're a battler. You're a brave man, you're a good man, and you have mine, and I'm sure everyone else's in rugby's best wishes. Maggie?
Yeah, Gareth, I just want to say thank you for I guess, coming out to speak about it. And if anything, what you have done is you've given others the opportunity to speak about it openly who have that condition. And, you know, you've got the rugby family support no matter what. And I think you're an absolute legend. And also, well done on your Ironman on the weekend. I saw you did really well, and I saw the crowd in full support for you, because we truly do respect you as a person and as a true rugby legend.
Maggie, as you're here and you are one of the biggest names still in women's rugby, I want to talk to you about the trans rugby issue, which arose recently and which turned, in my Twitter feed at least, to be very toxic. If you don't know about this, Kelly Morgan, who was born Nicholas Morgan, he or she had played for East Wales as a teenager, returned to the game following transitioning to a female, now playing in the women's game. There were some I understand why the coach said these things. I think he was making light of it, but some of the comments he made about, folding opponents like deck chairs and so on, in retrospect, were not wise. But the issue is a big one. It's obviously bigger in athletics, but it comes into rugby and probably increasingly. So there are very entrenched views on this, and some are not particularly nice, if you ask me. What's your stance on the topic?
So to start off with, Brian, I read your article and I thought your article was very good. And the unfortunate thing and the situation that we're in right now, transgender people in sport is getting a lot of controversy and it's not being handled in the best way as far as I'm concerned. So if I talk about rugby, I'm not going to necessarily answer the question because I think it's such a complex question and the response is also going to be quite complex. So my view is that our sport is inclusive. I don't care what anyone says. It's an inclusive sport and we need to open up to allow people to play our sport. I think the issue that we have is that obviously we've got many transgender people coming into the sport and the challenge is that we need to make sure that we protect everyone. Yes. So my view is, I guess I throw it back to World Rugby, is making sure we manage the situation. So I think it's important that we do open it up for transgender women to play the sport, the same we have transgender men playing the sport. It's not obviously been spoken about. There probably is transgender men playing in the men's game, but we need to find a way of making sure we manage the situation. So what I guess will come down to is, I think we should open our sport to allow people to play the sport. We just got to make sure, like anything, we manage the environment to ensure that everyone who's playing are protected. But who do you support them playing the sport?
Well, a lot of people who don't know about rugby and use rugby just as a vehicle to make their own political or ethical point don't understand that even within male or female rugby, there are huge differences in size. And one of the things that they were saying is simply, if you have transgender women, the imbalance in size and power makes it dangerous. Well, I saw a photograph of the Hong Kong scrum half who was about 4'11", and the tallest, I think, Irish player who's 6'5". I mean, huge disparity. We let them play because we know that is not necessarily dangerous. So that aspect of it, automatically, the problem I have is this. Women's rugby is the growth area of rugby. It's very important we get it right. I believe the future of the game, actually, and the whole game, including men's rugby, is going to be in the hands of women and growing their game for various reasons. You would only need an unfortunate incident with a transgender female player, even if it wasn't causative because of the disparity in size, to put a lot of girls, females, off actually stepping onto the field if they thought there was a prospect that would happen and that it was automatically dangerous. We can't afford to have that. And therefore, because the research is partial, not conclusive, and still very much in dispute, I just think both legally, and probably ethically, and for rugby reasons, World Rugby and the governing bodies should have to say, look, until we get more information on this and we can prove within our parameters that there is not an automatic risk, then I'm sorry, just for the moment, we can't allow this. But if the information comes along, absolutely.
It's a difficult one, isn't it, Brian? So first, again, I'm going to throw it back to World Rugby and our governing body to make sure that this needs to be addressed. And what I slightly am frustrated about is that nothing has really come to the forefront to discuss how we're going to manage this issue. I'm hugely against stopping someone from playing our sport. I just want our sport to be inclusive. And again, I come back to the bit that we need to find ways of managing the environment. So if I was to play in a game and I had there was a transgender woman in the opposition team, if I was informed of that, I think it should be down to the team and the players who are playing that game to make that decision. It should not be based on the fact that because she's a transgender woman, that the game is not going to happen and she's not allowed to play. I hugely disagree with it. And I think I'm even more frustrated the fact that no one's really asked. I mean, a lot of the women who play the sport, let's actually hear what people got to say. And I know people have made their comments, and people who are outside of the sport have made the comments. Again, if I was in a situation where I was up against a transgender woman, I would still play. And I think it's important to make sure that the people who are playing that game feel that they are comfortable with that situation.
Yeah, you were part of 3 World Cup squads, so was I actually, but 2006, 10 and 14, finally got there in 14. I saw not all of them live, I saw 2 of them live. How did it feel to finally get your hands on the World Cup?
Brian, you know what it's like playing in any...
Thanks for reminding me of that. Yeah.
Do you know, playing in a World Cup is tough, and then getting to a final, you feel like you know your hands already are on the cup, and then to lose it is painful. It really is. I'm not going to lie to you. And with my England team that I was part of, we went through that, you know, over a 12-year period. So to spend 4 years, get there, then lose it, then spend another 4 years, get to the final, and then lose it by 3 points.
How did you pick yourself up? Because with a lot of people, to carry on, because as you say, it's another 4 years dedication. It's quite a way away. And you've got to find the motivation to go again. And you had to do it twice.
Yeah, I mean, so I remember after 2010 in particular, because a lot of the players were still quite young, so we had that ability to keep going on for another 4 years. I just remember us having a meeting talking about, you know, are we going to commit to this? Are we going to go again for another 4 years? And I think that drive and that motivation to know that we are capable of winning a World Cup, when you have that inner belief, you feel like actually we should continue, we should keep going. And knowing that our England team had got to a final several times beforehand and not won a World Cup, I think it was starting to turn from not just belief, it was starting to turn to frustration because we had the players. And the reason why I would say probably we lost it in 2010 was that the fact that when things were going well, it was brilliant. But when things weren't going so well, we didn't know how to problem solve and change it up. And
almost that's a fine lie, so. And I just thought New Zealand kicking game was better. One of the big factors.
Spot on, yeah.
You retired shortly after winning. Just said, that's enough now. I've got everything I want.
Yeah, I had finally spent 12 years of my life and achieved the goal that my team and myself was working towards. And I'm very thankful. I got to finish on a high. You know, as you know, Brian, there's many athletes and rugby players in particular that want to end on a high and unfortunately don't have that option. You know, either injury stops them or, they're just out of form, or they just, weren't able to make it to that World Cup final that they wanted to get to. So I was able to retire on my terms, and I've been able to transition into the media career. And what's great is I can look back now on my journey with fond memories, and I can look back at the women's game and think, wow, look where it's going. So I feel quite content with the way I finished, and just pleased that the women's game is going from strength to strength.
All the recognition you've got during your playing career and subsequently, fully deserved, absolutely earned. But are you surprised at the level of it?
Interesting. I have had a lot of recognition after the World Cup, and I think it was really pleasing. I've got an MBE, which is amazing, and
Hall of Fame, Marshall Award.
I know. Let's just stop, bro. It's not all about me really, but it's great to have all this recognition, and I think everyone will always say it's not about you as an individual, it's about a team. And I think most importantly, all I wanted was our team to be recognised. And what was really great after that World Cup in 2014, we were named BBC Team of the Year, Sports Personality Team of the Year. First time a women's team has ever been won that award. So I think for me, I was just proud that my team had been recognised for that and the management had been recognised for that. But I wasn't aware that I was going to get all the accolades that I did get. And, you can look back at those accolades and think that that's awesome. But I think now I have to think forward and go, actually, what do I want to achieve now? What's my next step? And, I've got aspirations to, who knows, one day be CEO of the RFU. But I'm going to keep driving, keep working towards being the best that I can be, and hopefully making the world of women's sport popular and people wanting to be part of it.
You could be an MP, but you're probably too honest for that. Anyway, that's all we have time for this week on Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph and Mitsubishi Motors. Thank you very much to my co-host Maggie Alphonsi, and thank you, as always, to all our guests. Enjoy the opening weekend of the World Cup. It's going to be a cracker, and all the rest of it certainly will be as well. Wherever you are, tune in, download, because we'll be looking back next Monday, reviewing all the action Remember, you can subscribe to the podcast, it's free, then you won't miss an episode during the World Cup or beyond. And if you want to, write a review while you're there. But for now, it's goodbye.
Full Contact. In association with Mitsubishi Motors, drive your ambition.